Hello, friends, and welcome to the Learning Future podcast. I'm your host, Luca Parry. Thank you for joining us again, and welcome to 2023. I hope you've had a really delightful transition into this new year and that you were able to let go of some of the challenges that really have existed for all of us over the last couple of years and renew your passion for the work that you do in the world. We are continuing with our Education Transformed series, and it's my absolute delight to have Gavin Dykes joining us for today's conversation. He is many things, including the program director of the Education World Forum since 2004, in fact, which is held in London and convenes a range of different education ministers from all over the world. He's also a director of the Asian Summit on Education and Skills in Bangalore, Mumbai and Delhi, and he contributes to the advisory boards for ISTE, University of the People, and Karanga. He's also on the board of Lyfta and is a judge for the Empathy Week Awards. Gavin has got a huge amount of experience in working with governments, corporations, foundations, schools, and universities, again, all over the world. He is quite prolific in his writing, including how might education technologies be sustained, led one of the case studies from around the world, and that was published through the World Bank, and Aspire High, Imagining Tomorrow's School Today by Corwin Press 2017. Gavin, I could keep reading your bio, mate, but it's a delight to have you here and I can talk to you directly. Thank you for joining us on the Learning Future podcast.
Oh, it's a delight to be part of it. And thank you, Luca, for inviting me to join in with it.
Well, the conversation really that I'd love us to explore today, Gavin, is one around transformation itself. I think, and just before we started recording, we've been discussing some of the disruptions that are coming our way around artificial intelligence and chat GPT. You've got a long history of working in educational technology and understanding its implications, and also what we might do at policy level as policymakers. So my first question to you really is, how do you understand transformation as opposed to reform or improvement? What kind of comes up into your consciousness, into your awareness when you think about that word, transformation?
I'm kind of uncomfortable about transformation, and part of this comes from looking at innovation over years, innovation in education, and thinking about how you get innovations to stick, and how you can make an innovation which works beautifully in one location move to another. Thinking about things that are underpin the way that education works. And sorry, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but
not at all.
Perhaps. But when I worked or was seconded to government briefly, actually it was for a few years, but and in that time, one of the things which hit me very much was number one, I'd moved from spending all my time trying to raise the money to doing stuff, to spending all my time trying to spend the money, which you had to do within a set of rules, which very interesting.
Indeed,
but within that bucket of things, you have capital and you have revenue. And capital is relatively easy to come by, and revenue is not. So your revenue spending, you've got to be particularly careful. Forgive me if this has all changed, but I suspect it hasn't. But when I'm trying to transform education, what's really important, if I was trying to transform education, the really important thing in transferring those innovations in changing practice or doing something differently, is the people.
Yes,
the people is a revenue. So actually, I think an awful lot of our focus when we talk about transformation lands on, it could be tool, chat GPT, or it could be it could be using computers, as it was at one stage.
Yes.
Or maybe it's not computers. I'll argue it's mobile phones. But actually, the fundamental to me is about bringing people together, having people share. I think about working with collective intelligence of the community that you serve, of the whole community that you serve. And I love examples where I learn good things about what happened. There was an innovation conference in Brazil I heard of, but didn't, sadly. And that in that this was a couple of years ago that I heard of it. And what they did was they took the teacher from school, but then they took the best pupil from the school. And the third person in the party was the most difficult pupil from the school.
Oh, that's great.
Challenging. And I just thought it was wonderful because the best pupil in the school, and this is perhaps overplaying it a bit, but the best pupil of the school is somebody who would work within the system and who would come up with ideas. The difficult pupil was somebody who would do things. And if you can bring together those pieces, I'm not sure if that conference descended into chaos or whether it was hugely successful, so I can't give you. But I think that kind of thinking, which brings people together, which allows the dissonance, which creates innovation, and which encourages thought, but is also kind of, if you like, touching on collective intelligence too. So we're not just single track focused.
Yeah.
And all of that, and I apologize if I riff off that just a little bit more.
Of course, yeah.
What I've always felt with it also is, number one, it's all about people. Number two, when we're trying to do things, we tend to think of, this is the answer, this is what it's going to be. Whereas what I always wanted to set up the Institute of Balance, but it's a kind of thing, a stupid thing. It's just an idea. But balance is what we need, because by getting the most difficult people and the best people, or getting the group of people that we have standing in front of us or sitting in front of us who we're trying to work with to help them learn, or whatever, the strategy that you use should be the one that fits and is worked out with the people that you're seeking to work with. This is true when talking about policy and ministers. It's true if you're talking about teachers or leaders, or if you're talking about learners.
Oh, wow. Gavin, that's wonderful. I mean, a few things come up for me in that. The first is that for us to evolve, we need to be involved. And one of the processes that we use a lot here at the Learning Future and through other work, Karanga and other platforms and communities of which we're a part, is kind of co-design. It's looking at diversity as strength, and then understanding that it's only with the multiple perspectives in mind that we can actually synthesize something that is of a higher quality than what we currently have. The other part that comes up for me, and I mean, you've worked a lot with very senior people in government, Gavin, and so either as an advisor or as a convener of the Education World Forum. And so, when ministers, 130, 140 ministers, however many you get, are convened, what's the kind of narrative that you find is most powerful for them? Because as you've stated, I think quite clearly, you've got capital and you've got revenue. So you might put a new building in, or might do a capital expense. Here's a bunch of new technology. But actually the least sexy thing is actually doing the long-term transformation work with people, bringing educators in a world that's so rapidly shifting. So what I guess are you noticing in that kind of ministry level, minister space, policymaker space, knowing that at the UNGA last year, the summit was the Transforming Education Summit. And what's your reflections on that when we talk about transformation? Do you find that this is getting cut through, is being picked up? What's your thinking at this point?
I think if there's several questions in there, several ones that we could pick up. I think we are all subject to an awful lot of opinion and different things coming through, and that's that makes things difficult. Each of our circumstances, our personal or national, if it's our national education system, there are particular issues in particular countries, all kinds of different things go on. I kind of recall, it makes me think, just as an example, the kind of conversations that I've had over the many years. And one that sticks in my mind is, you try and think of, how can I connect to somebody? And I said, how many schools are you responsible for? And this minister, and I won't mention which country because it doesn't matter, but the answer, the minister thought for a moment and said, well, we've got 18,000 schools. We've got 18,000 groups of people, and we got about 12,000 buildings. And I thought, but that's just stayed with me as a really good answer. That because it just within that answer you can paint your picture of the challenges that country might be facing, and the sorts of level of challenges. So I think the big thing is to seek to create a narrative that people can respond to, but to avoid boxing people in, so that what you get is a standard answers. Otherwise, you're serving one part of the world or one part of the prejudices which you naturally have. And so creating it's like buying the frame and the paper on which to draw, rather than taking a drawing and just adding to that drawing. Yeah. So try to keep it open, and in that way also, by keeping it open, I think one you will hear about more about what different people's experience is, and two, you open the door for people to learn more from each other and to cause them to reflect. And I think also, if you go down the single path type of thing, where you have in mind something you're pushing towards as you set your agenda, you miss a lot, but you also generate resistance of a kind. So resistance. So I think whenever you're dealing with these conferences, remember the best and most important conversations will happen between people. And between people, not those on the stage. So what you want from the conversations from the stage is things that stimulate thought, rather than close down thought and narrow it.
Gavin, I'd love you to, from your vantage point, with your, I suppose, definition of transformation as being people-centered in some way, and the piece for me is transformation towards what? I mean, my personal manifesto, our professional manifesto, the Learning Future, really is around this, a human-centered education system. What does that mean? Multidimensional, hence social, emotional, and cognitive. And we can even add physical and spiritual into that space. And one that really is, as much around the development of capabilities that enable you to continue to learn throughout the course of your life. So I don't think any of that's all that groundbreaking, frankly. But I wonder, when you look at the countries with whom you work and that you support, if you were to kind of group the countries in different levels of ambition, more than where they currently are, like what's the kind of breakdown when you look at the world, like across as a globe? Which countries do you think are really on a transformation trajectory, and which ones do you think? I'm not specifically, but what kind of number, what percentages do you think are moving towards this moment in time, post-COVID, where resources are squeezed, we're in an inflationary environment economically as well? Yeah, do you have a sense of countries really, are they going for it at this point? Are we snapping back to old ways? What's your sense from your vantage point?
I think, there's a real risk of snapping back to where we've been before. And I think that is an opportunity direction that things move in. But it's the natural one, because actually the measures we've got too often, and I'm not talking about school assessment, but on the other hand, school assessment is one of those things that take you back. Have the rules changed?
Yes.
And if they haven't, then what are we going to do? we've talked for years about actually how learning is driven by the exams. So, what are your rules for running a school? What are your rules for whatever part of education you're for, or what are your rules for yourself? I need to get those grades. If you're in the mindsets, it's very difficult for people generally to move on. It seems as though I'm running away from an answer in a way. I think, but I think it's. I think it is difficult, but I think what we need to try to look at, are these really open conversations, so that we start to think about things differently. Or another way of doing this stuff. I mean, countries are very different. So yes. I always like Michael Fullan's stuff, which was, I think it was Michael. But he, amongst others, have talked about actually when schools are working or not working, you don't put the best school with the worst school together. You put the schools which are roughly equal performance, so they can help each other improve together. Otherwise, you've got a master-student relationship rather than together. And so that's where the social dynamics. Those kind of social things make it work. Another thing is, do you put China and Malta together? Well, one's 400,000 people, the other is, I can't remember how many million.
1.4, I think.
But it's so you look for where there are similarities. Right. I think, or what I do, I look where there are likely to be similar problems because of the structure and the position, and then try and get those working together and share. So, and that can be about making a conversation in a dinner queue.
Yeah,
it doesn't. It's not necessarily happening on a stage.
Yeah, I wonder, Gavin, would you point to particular case studies of ongoing sustained transformation? I mean, often, you think about Finland or Estonia most recently due to their PISA results, or Singapore. Yeah. I mean, these places are often, sometimes Canada and Korea, but who would you say is
provinces?
Really, provinces, yeah, nice, good point. Who would you point to and say, actually, this country under this leadership is really having a crack, because as you stated, the context is queen always. And, there's also resource challenges in particular for much of the world, particularly the majority world. So, yeah, what would you say? We should take a look at this, because so often it's come to us, go to Finland or go to Singapore, rather than have a look at what's happening in this lower resource environment and the innovation that's taking place here. I think that's something that we should absolutely elevate. And it's the work that we do at Karanga, as you're well aware as well. So, yeah, what would you point to?
So I think part of it can be looking at, don't necessarily go to the country, don't necessarily go to the government, and this is not to do down the government, because they may be enabling this.
Sure.
But sometimes look at what the foundations are doing.
Yeah.
Foundations are, I think, can be a hidden gem of, recognizing a particular problem, working on the ground usually, so working with real people, doing that kind of thing. So I hesitate to pick out any in particular, because then that's kind of overloading it, and actually you risk. In time, sometimes you risk kind of moving it from a position of doing the fantastic work they're doing to kind of looking to the limelight.
Talking about the way. Yeah.
So it's actually there's often quiet work and organic work that has been done by foundations, which is wonderful. If I'm looking at countries, I mean, it's interesting because when you start doing things on a national scale, it's difficult. But I always take and Passy would be a better person to speak about it than I. But I think the fundamental for Finland was when it, as a country, recognized that it wanted greater social equity.
Yeah.
And so it was driven by kind of, in a sense, a higher philosophical outlook. And it could be, in a sense, judged against that. So it wasn't trying to get better scores in PISA. It wasn't trying to improve. It was actually doing something which was about particular issues that country had, and seeking to address them in a way that was supported by the population. So all Finnish people, please forgive me if I'm way off target with that, but that's what I've taken away from what I've seen and witnessed. And I think it's a fantastic example. Meantime, going to another school, India, another situation. India's national education plan is worth a look. It's that they. Because of the size of the educations and the size of the challenge, that's going to take a lot of effort and actually to work. But the aims and the targets are exciting, and there's a lot that many of us can. Well, I've learned from, and many. It's going to take time because you're having to put the social constructs in place for it to happen, to take people with you. But there's some remarkable things that are going on there. And I think that holds a great aim for a great hope in terms of sustained transformation, as they say.
As they say, but yeah. Well, it is
the best transformations happen when you don't call them transformations.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually a really great point. And I feel like, just to your earlier point on Finland, there does seem to be something about kind of like Campbell's law, this idea that when we start paying attention to the metric, it starts to corrupt the entire system. And so this is what happens when we teach to the test, as opposed to creating, a socially equitable education system, frankly, a country, and quality teaching and learning with quality people, with an elevating status of the profession. All of a sudden, the results will take care of themselves because we focused on actually the core activity, as opposed to trying to work our way up the league table, so to speak. And
that's right. And it's all grade related. One of the things I work with a little organization on, but it had a big impact in some places. If it's encapsulated in this little story, but if you're starting with a new class,
yes,
today, one of the things you could do is have a conversation with the class about what would you like our reputation to be. Reputation within the school. So you can talk about a sense of values. You can talk to now that's fine, but that's just a nice little conversation. But then say, right, what would be an example of me showing whatever you've landed on as the thing that you want? Do you a kind of thing that it could be is we're supportive. Well, what's an example of you being supportive to one of the other pupils in the class? So you get a small list of the kinds of examples of behavior that demonstrate that you're moving towards it. Then you say, well, you can do it on a bit of paper, or this. Well, we had an app which did this.
Right.
You can then feed that into the behaviors, and then you can self-award if you believe you've acted in that way. You can get one of your peers to award you a credit, or you can get your teacher or mentor to award you a credit. So you've got different credits for heading in the right direction. And you can do a review after a term or a week or whatever. You can make this very complicated, or you can make it very simple.
Yes.
But the fundamental is you've had a conversation where you agree what it is you're aiming for.
Yeah.
So those, I come back to what I've been talking about, the people part.
Yeah.
Transformation, these sorts of tools. And there are a lot of those tools. So I've been pressing to find out what other tools have we got for socializing behavior. Just so that we all become part of it. And I think there is in the background happening some growth of those sorts of tools. But when I was working on technology with the government in England, the agency back at that time had, and it's moved on to something else now, but they had what they called a self-assessment tool.
Yeah.
And that looked through areas of the operation of the school, so management, pupils, teachers, part in it, the kit, the technology the school had.
Yeah.
And what it encouraged was a discussion within the school about where are we with this? Because everything was measured on a scale. The statements we have no computers at all and we'll never tolerate them, through to we've got lots and doing well. So you put yourself on each of these things and you measure it, and so you get an assessment, a self-assessment of where you are with technology. Big thing in this, which I think was probably forgotten at times, was that this should stimulate a conversation, not in the headmaster. Sorry, that's a very old-fashioned.
The school leader,
head study, headmaster or headmistress's study, but a conversation among the teachers, among the pupils, among the parents of the pupils, among the community around the school. So what you're getting is an assessment of everyone. When you have that assessment, you can begin to prioritize where your effort should go in terms of making a change to the way the school is achieving in that area. Yeah.
I'm really struck, Gavin, by just your language here. There's a clear theme in our conversation as it's taken place, where it's kind of nothing about us without us, clearly. It's like the importance of co-design, right? And co-authorship, I'm kind of hearing as well. And of course, a focus not on the tool, but as the tool as a way to kind of increase the focus on the human being, right? On the people part, as opposed to, I think, and our colleague Andreas Schleicher, I've heard him say this many times, but we really want to support first-class human beings to be developed, not second-class robots. And so if we're just trying to kind of, I don't know, interact with technologies in a way that really isn't serving us or isn't creating new value, right? If we look at the learning compass from the OECD, of course, which you know very well, this idea and reconciling conflicts and dilemmas, these are the kind of human skills that now we can take these tools and utilize. And I think all of us are a little, and perhaps governments, and I might be a bit stronger as someone not working so closely with governments, but so often, it becomes about, well, what's the announceable? How do we ensure, because we're in a political cycle, we want there to be something happen. And so, yes, there's a capital expense, but, at the end of the day, it's what are the human beings doing? How are they behaving? What learning is taking place? What capabilities are being developed and elevated? And I think that's what I'm taking from our chat, really, when we think about the, word transformation, but, in case, evolution, anything moving us forward. Is that a fair summation?
Absolutely. Sorry? Yes, absolutely a fair summation. And I think it's also, we're terribly good at measuring things, but we're also very good at measuring all the wrong things.
Yeah.
Which I had a conversation. Institute of Balance stuff here. This is just to be thought about in terms of balance. So I'm not trying to say you need to balance things to what is right for the audience that you're working with and the people that you're seeking to support.
Yes.
But sorry, I've lost my track at that point.
I think.
Sorry, I was talking about disasters and how COVID's been a disaster.
Yeah.
In so many ways. But I remember a conversation with somebody who had lived in Lebanon during the wars in Lebanon.
Wow.
And the dreadful things, and talking about, and was a teenager. She and is now playing a senior role in a major innovative organization in education. And she was, or what I took away from one of our conversations was how the skills she had to develop, the things she had to learn, the capabilities she had to go through or build up, and were phenomenal.
Yeah.
Where do they appear on any school report?
Yes.
Now, the same will be true for. It doesn't matter whether it's Ebola, or it's COVID, or it's a great flu from before. There are people who will have to adapt and take on more senior roles. And I don't know, what my feeling is when younger people are given that opportunity, how so often they become shining stars.
Yeah.
If the restrictions on them are not taken away. And I have a picture in my mind, I'm sorry, but schools where you sit at hard desks, or used to anyway.
Yeah.
They were systems of control. Whereas actually lifting the lid on the capabilities of people, finding what their real enthusiasms are, and fanning the flames of those enthusiasms and supporting them in taking them forward. It is a different way of educating, but one that I think we don't see enough of.
Wonderful, Gavin. It reminds me of a conversation we've had on this podcast, actually, with Michael Fullen, and he talked about school systems command and control downwards historically, but of course, what we want them to do is to liberate downwards and to inform upwards. And so that idea of enablement, which you've picked up a couple of times as well, I think is so critical because, of course, very complex systems in place, especially when we have these global shocks as well. But, there are many strengths, and there's not just the learning loss conversation. There's also what's the capability gain potentially as part of all this. So I've got a final question for you, which is, it's been quite a good conversation. We could double click on many of those aspects, but if you were to leave the listeners here that are starting in 2023, thinking about their roles in schools, in education, in the private sector, in non-profit sector, whatever it is that people are contributing, what is it that you would leave them with? Just something to ruminate on, or some wisdom that you've picked up over your numerous decades doing this work around transformation, innovation in education.
Oh, I wish I was wise.
What's a wise thing to say? I'd probably go.
I think about the people that you're working with and think about how you get the best from them. And getting the best from them is not a one-way street. That's about them doing the best they can as a result. So it's actually not falling into the trap of fixed ways of doing things. Think creatively, and often I've asked people about what's the most memorable lesson you ever had.
Great question.
It's not very often been just a standard day at school.
No.
It's the day the sun shone so brightly that we all felt it would be good to go out.
Yes.
And pick daisies and talk about what's going on in the world.
Yes.
Or the snow day we had to work together at home, or something happens.
Yes.
Externally, and you create the circumstances. So think also about, can you create those circumstances, get the whole school working together on something?
Yes, I think everybody's answer to that would be social in nature, wouldn't it be, Gavin? Be doing things with others, as you've said. Gavin, mate, fantastic to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time, and hope that Northern Hemisphere winter passes quickly. But yeah, really appreciate your insights. All the best with the forum this year, and look forward to crossing paths in 2023.
Absolutely, Luca. Thank you. You take care.
Thank you.
All the best.